And we're just briefly going to start. Just bear with us. Just give us 2 minutes. There are people in the waiting room who are entering. So let's just give them 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. We'll get started and we'll let people enter as in when they join in. It's about 3 minutes past 5, so we'll get started. We have Mridula with us, and she's going to give us, take us through a workshop on zero waste living and circular economy. This workshop is part of a series that Our Better Planet plans to host continuously over fortnightly, every bi-weekly, so that our consumers are a little bit more aware of where our product inspirations are coming from and our partnerships are coming from. We also want our partners to join us and see for themselves that the way we want to really take this forward is by first introducing concepts to people, and then probably explaining their consumption cycle to them, so that they can mindfully make a decision for a certain kind of a purchase, whether it is a lifestyle purchase or it's a lifestyle change. So that's our intention, and this is our first workshop in that series. And I'll let Mridula take it over from here. So thank you everybody for joining. I hope you have a fab time here. Thank you. Mridula, you have the controls now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for adding me to this workshop sessions that you'll be taking forward on Our Better Planet. We will be talking about the zero waste movement today. Everyone on this panel, if you're someone who has not heard of the term zero waste, or people who are living zero waste before, zero waste simply means that there are a set of people who are trying their best to live a life where they don't create any waste. Now, this is theoretically seemingly impossible, but it's an attempt that people have been trying to do. And in that process, we have been learning a lot of things about the way we live and how we can improve it. If you're someone who has heard about zero waste movement, you might be assuming it's very correlated to going plastic free, or going for an organic movement, or you might have heard about these kind of labels when you're trying to shop sustainable products, or shopping natural products. So you might have an impression that that is what the zero waste movement is about. But what the zero waste movement really is about is trying to make sure that there is no waste created in the loop. Basically, that you live a life where anything that is used up comes back into the system somehow. So how did this become a thing? Why did the zero waste movement become so trendy? It's something that we remember our grandparents living as well. So why is it trending now? There was a woman called Bea Johnson. She's in Europe. What she started doing was she started thinking about how she could eliminate waste at source. We usually tend to think about waste when we throw it away in our dustbins, but what she started doing was she started trying to look for alternatives where she could bring items home of necessity without packaging in the first place. And she started doing this experiment for years on, and at the end of 4 or 5 years she started realizing that her and her family had started creating so little waste because they cut it out at source, that her and her family of 4 people created only enough waste that fit into one trash jar. Now this was not something that they had set out to achieve, but it was a natural consequence of the way they had started making changes in their lifestyle. So what is the realization that we get from this? That waste is not a concept in the natural world. For example, if you look at animals, you look at birds, bees, everything else in nature, they don't have a dustbin they need to worry about. They don't create waste. The way they live is just naturally zero waste on its own. Whatever is excreted as waste product is again coming back into the earth and coming back as nutrients. So everything is cyclic. So waste would not exist if it was not produced in the first place, or if we didn't consider things waste to begin with, if we used it as a resource continuously. Now, this is a concept that should have been quite obvious. It existed, like I said, in our grandparents' generation. There was no plastic, there was nothing else. So people lived zero waste by default because they just didn't have any other option. But why is it rising up again? Because there are a lot of people who are on an individual level, they have started taking up this challenge to try and go zero waste in their own lifestyle. Now, it has started picking up so much that you will see grocery stores, you will see, stores that are trying to make ingredients available in bulk without packaging, without any waste that might end up in your house. And this trend is actually picking up now. You can also see Facebook groups of zero waste lifestyle in India, which have like 17K members maybe 3 years ago, and now they have like 50K members or more counting. You see a lot of Instagram pages of people who are trying to live zero waste, and they show their own version and their own attempt at how they're trying to make that happen. My Instagram page also happens to be one of those things, which led me to learn more about the zero waste lifestyle. So how do we make zero waste easy to understand? So basically, we look at all the things around us in our home, everything that we use in 2 perspectives. They're either designed to be discarded, which means when they came into your house, that product was by design meant to be used only once or twice and thrown away. You can't do anything about that product once you use it. That is a linear form of a design, okay? And that is what you see over here. This first, it's called a linear economy world, okay? So all the products that are designed in this world are made to be discarded. And how do we look at a more circular solution for that? We try to look for items in our house, which if you use once, you don't need to throw it away after a single use, right? You can always keep using it again and again and again. So once you invest in it, it will be in your house for decades together, and you can even pass it down to your kids, and it will keep staying in the system. So you don't have to, you don't end up creating waste because of this product. And that is a product that has been designed to be circular. And that is part of a circular economy. Basically, you make and sell products that can stay in the loop forever. At max, if you want to probably repair it, you can repair it again, and you can again continue using it. So that is how we identify the things around us. Now, before we get started on a brainstorming session, I will just explain to you briefly why the linear economy worked out, because it seems very obvious, when we think about circular economy, that this is how products should have been designed. But why did the linear economy work? Why did we end up with so much waste in our lives? So linear economy is basically where industries went out, they took resources from the planet, they created products because it was quite easy to just take the raw materials, create products and sell it. And they never thought about the product, what will happen to the product once the customer throws it away. That was not the job of the industries. They never took responsibility for that. So we ended up creating a world where we were just taking, making and throwing it away. And this worked out great. In fact, linear economy is not a very old concept. It is just something that started 70 to 80 years ago. Before that, we lived in a zero waste world by default. But 70 to 80 years ago, industries started realizing they could just take resources that are available and make whatever they want. It was exciting because, people could create cities, they could, make construction material, they could clear space in the forest, build infrastructure. It was convenient because, whatever packaging you made that was disposable means the industries didn't have to worry about it. They wouldn't have to, take back the glass bottles and clean it again. If anyone remembers Pepsi, before the plastic bottles started coming in, you would remember Pepsi bottles were actually sold in glass and they were collected back by the shopkeeper. And then that would go back to the factory and it would be washed, it would be refilled, and it would be sold. And that was the old way, which was actually circular and zero waste to begin with. But that was expensive. Industries wanted to get rid of that responsibility. So what they did was they really loved the fact that they could package something that was in plastic that the customer could pick up and just carry around with them. And this obviously reduced the prices for them also, made it easy for more people to consume these things. And it just became popular very quickly. And economic prosperity, because if you can transport these products to as many places as possible in packaging, you can make more money. And you don't have to worry about the whole cleaning and refilling part of it, right? So linear economy really picked up in the last 50 to 70 years. Now, what this linear economy means for us today, we have started seeing the consequences of it. We have started seeing that when you make products which have to be thrown away after a few uses, they sit around, especially when it's made out of plastic. Plastic is a product that lasts forever. It was genius because it was durable, but that durability is what is polluting the environment now, because it is durable in the environment as trash forever. Now, and also the rampant consuming of resources from the earth without thinking about putting it back. Now we are, facing problems like loss of fertile land and loss of biodiversity, depletion of water tables and things like that, because we're not thinking about, as industries, how we can put that back into the system. And we're also facing wasteful use of resources in general. If there's effluents that are coming out of factory, we're not worrying about, how that's going to affect the waterways or how we can reduce the toxicity of those effluents. And all of this is because we were a bit too excited by the positives of linear economy. But now, as a generation, we are facing that consequence. So what has changed? The fact that we are facing today, this generation is now facing the consequences of the linear economy that was enjoyed for the last 50 years. And that is why we are now in a situation where we have to brainstorm on how we can go back to the circular system and how we can move out of this polluting linear economy. And honestly, if we weren't facing the consequences, I don't think we would be here and trying to learn how to get into a better world. So what is the circular economy? Basically, you create a system where no matter what you take from the Earth's resources, you figure out how to make the best use of it, make it last so that you don't have to take more. And even if you take more, you take it in a way that you can put back value into the Earth, that it is capable of growing more resources. So how do we look at resources in a circular economy? Okay, so there is no such thing as waste. If we do end up creating waste, if we feel that waste is necessarily created in any product, we have to think of what can we do with this waste now? Can we use it as a material to create more products? Can we use it to upcycle? So linear economy becomes an opportunity for innovation in circular economy. So if there's any waste that is being generated out of linear economy, now we can think of ideas and products that we can create out of this to create more products, add value to the economy, and eliminate the waste at source. Infinitely renewable. We have to make sure that the resources that we use will never exhaust in the foreseeable future. So if we start using some resource, and if we think that the rate of consumption is greater than the rate of replenishment, then we probably shouldn't touch it. Or if we can figure out a way where the rate of replenishment of that resource is greater than the consumption, then only we go ahead and we use it in a judicious manner. So we also learn how to optimize. What is the least amount of natural resources that we can consume to reach the same objective? If you're using 10 liters of water to create jeans pant, and that is obviously not sustainable because there are too many people who are buying jeans pants. How can we optimize that? How can we create those jeans pants in maybe 1 liter of water? And maybe just, maybe we can recycle those 10 liters of water again and again and again and produce 10 different jeans pants, right? So optimism becomes necessary in the circular economy. And responsibly, how are we responsibly using these resources? How can we run the process such that we create minimum waste, minimum carbon footprint, minimum effluent or toxicity, anything that is going into the atmosphere or into the water or into the soil. How can we be more responsible about the impact of this production? So this is what the circular economy encompasses. So the end product must always be either reusable, so that it keeps getting used and doesn't get thrown away, recyclable, so that if we can't reuse it, is it a material that we can recycle, which is basically shred it in its form, maybe process it, melt it, and create another product again. Or and when I say 100%, it means 100%. Like, for example, plastic is not 100% recyclable. Every time you recycle plastic, it downgrades in its form and becomes softer and softer until it cannot be recycled anymore and eventually has to be thrown away. So plastic is not a 100% recyclable material, but glass, aluminium, these things are 100% recyclable. So a glass bottle recycled turns into a glass bottle. A aluminium can recycled turns into an aluminium can. Aluminium cans from the 70s, which are being recycled, are still in the system today. So if we recycle all the aluminium that we have, we can even live in a world where we don't have to mine more aluminium from the earth. So that is why 100% recyclability is important in a circular economy. And or if that is not possible, we have to make sure that our products are organically compostable. For example, if I literally throw it away in the nature, does it degrade in nature the way leaves and any other wood or any other natural resource would degrade? Does it degrade at the same rate? So that would be important. So the three factors are very important when we are trying to think of solutions. All right, so now we'll start the brainstorming session. Think about all the items in your room right now. And I'll expect some interaction from you guys now. So think about any object that you have around you, which has been designed to throw away, or there is something in that product that needs to be thrown away after using it. And now we'll try to think of a solution for it. What could be an alternative that you can either think of from the past, before this product was invented, what did people use before? Maybe that could be an answer, or maybe you can come up with your own solution, or maybe we can brainstorm and see what is an alternative for it if we had to go without it, right? So let's do this thought experiment now. And yes, so identify the products and services you use. It could be a pen, tissue paper, anything that is there in your house. And tell us how you find a solution that fits into the circular system. So Manoj sir showed us a pen. Please tell us what is linear about that pen, which is disposable.
I think it's made completely of plastic. So eventually it will go into a landfill. Unless somebody consciously recycles this plastic, and I'm not sure with different kinds of plastics being used together, whether that would really happen, because segregation of different kinds of plastic is a big headache for the recyclers, right? So such composite plastic products generally will not find that kind of recycling that we would like to have.
Okay, but do you think the body of the pen is the linear part of that design? Because you're not throwing away the body of the pen after you're done using the ink, after the ink is over. So
mostly yes nowadays. So that is also the unfortunate part, that the use of refills no longer seems to be the way of life. Over the period of years, I think buying refills don't seem to be the practice anymore. Just
even the refills were disposable, actually, if we think about it, so before that, we used to have fountain pens, ink pens, which is still there, but it is seen more as a luxury and a fancy product, and fountain pens were a body that you could maintain forever, and the inside refill is something you can refill with the ink, which came in a jar. And that was a circular system. So the only thing you had to buy again and again is the ink in a bottle, and you take a dropper and you refill your pen every time. So that was a completely circular system that did not create any waste in the process.
How about a PU yoga mat?
Yoga mat is disposable because of the material. Unfortunately, after many years, it will wear and tear. And at that time, we have to think about the fact that it is plastic, which is wearing and tearing. So definitely this will need a natural replacement. It is already reusable by nature, but after a few reuses, it's obviously going to be thrown away. So cork mats are an example. Cork mat is made from natural cork, which will, even if it starts biodegrading, it can go back into your compost or the nature. So a lot of people are giving me examples about gadgets and appliances in their house. That is actually not a very great example. Yes, it is something we also need to be mindful about, how it is recycled and how it is repurposed. But the body of the material sometimes is not the important part. It is also about how it is being used. For example, your laptop is probably creating waste because your laptop company does not repair it easily. For example, Apple is facing a lot of problems these days because they design their gadgets in such a way. It is not about plastic or metal, but Apple designs their gadgets in such a way that it is not easy to repair them. So it's all you as a consumer, you are forced to throw it away, which means they have made their products disposable because they want to keep selling you more and more. So the way to make that recyclable, the way to make that circular is to have gadgets which can be repaired easily, or you can replace the parts easily. And the old parts can be recycled to be created into new metals and new parts. Okay, so modem, TV, all of these things, they come under the same category. Over here, the right to repair is more important than the material itself. For example, it's not important that everything should go plastic free. Things like your laptop, your mobile, they are being used every day. They are being used in really tough conditions. They need to have the durability that the plastic provides them. If you made your laptop out of wood, imagine it will start catching termite, fungus, and all your important documents will get thrown, get wasted. So the choice of material is also very important to make sure that the product is durable enough to survive many uses. So making the right choice of where plastic should be used can also help you stay in the circular economy. In clothes and shoes, clothes, definitely there is excessive use of polyester, which can definitely be avoided because every time we wash it, microplastics come out in your washing machine, and that is a form of plastic that will remain in nature forever. So having natural fibers as your clothes is an important decision that you can make when you're buying something brand new. Obviously, it's not advisable to throw away whatever you have already, because again, either it's going through the washing machine or through the landfill, it is still waste. So we should be mindful and try and keep everything in the system as much as possible. Any small products that you guys can talk about? Thrifting, yes, thrifting is a solution because it is buying second-hand items again and again. So it keeps materials in loop. Keychain, keychain is, depends on, how long you decide to use it and what it's made up of, whether it's linear or circular. One example I will give everyone is tissue paper. Tissue paper, that's a very simple example, something that you use and dispose in one use. And a circular solution for that is cloth napkin, right? And okay, I'll show you some examples that I'm talking about now. Disposable razor blades. A lot of us use razor blades which are disposable in nature. Your Venus blades, your this, that, everything is designed so that we can buy a razor after 3 or 4 uses. So that could be replaced with either a metal razor or even a trimmer, a battery rechargeable trimmer, which can last you many, many, many more years than a disposable razor. So in comparison to that, it is a much more it's a much more circular solution. It's a much more zero waste solution. Plastic toothbrush, you have to think about the volume of waste you are creating on a daily basis. If it's a product that you're throwing away on a very regular basis, the more problem it creates. So plastic toothbrush is a necessity we all need, and we will have to throw it away. In fact, recently I learned that people who have braces have to brush 3 times a day, which means that their plastic toothbrush gets ruined in 1 month compared to the average, 6 to 7 months. So this is definitely like a huge contributor to, plastic pollution via consumer use. So bamboo toothbrushes are a solution for that. Now, a lot of people say bamboo toothbrush bristles are still nylon, for hygienic reasons. Maybe you have plant-based cornstarch bristles as well. But for the large part, you're basically cutting down on 90% of the plastic waste that could have been created. And you can, pluck out the bristles and save that for along with your other plastic waste. Now, the way the packaging is made for the products, right? So toothpaste comes in a tube. Now, this tube is a problem because tubes are designed to be squeezed, and then you can't refill that tube back. They have to be thrown away, right? So it was not designed keeping in mind that the consumer can use that tube again. So that is a problem. So maybe you could buy products which come in tin boxes, which have a cap that can remove it easily, you know. So the design of the packaging makes that product reusable for some other purpose. Maybe you could save that tin for, you know, saving spices in your kitchen and other things like that. You wouldn't have to throw away your tin box just because your first product was over. So the way the packaging is made is important. Disposable cups, again, under the same, you know, as tissues and things like that. Even if it's made out of paper, think about the fact, do you actually need to have it? You know, do you actually need tissue papers and paper cups if it can easily be replaced with something that is reusable? Would we even need to, you know, have to mine so many trees for paper to cut down and, you know, make these things? In many situations, it might feel helpless because, you know, we as a community have not gotten into the habit of being zero waste yet. But the more and more of us pick up the habit of carrying reusables with us and making that request, the less we will need disposables in our life. So no matter what it's made of, if it can be avoided or by you on an individual level, please do try and avoid it. Disposable cups are also lined with plastic. So, you know, they still don't biodegrade even though you throw them away. You can carry your own cup, which has a lid on it. Same goes for disposable plates. This is difficult because, you know, you probably won't carry a plate with you everywhere. But if you're hosting an event and you are the person who's making the decisions as a party host or an event hoster, and you have like maybe 20-30 people, which you can manage with rental steel cutlery, try and see if you can make that happen. If even one person can take up the responsibility to clean all the plates and keep it in place, you are avoiding such a huge amount of trash from going because of that one event. But if it's like a concert or something where disposables are necessary, then try and choose disposables that can at least be organically composted easily. Ketchup in plastic sachets compared to ketchup bottles or squeezies that a restaurant could keep. So a restaurant offers you sachets every time they serve something because it's easier for them to just forget about it. Whereas you might have seen restaurants which keep a squeezy bottle in the middle of a table, which any customer can use. And, you know, there's no sachet waste that is created every time a new customer comes and orders something. So that bottle is a circular design solution compared to the sachets. So you notice how I'm not talking about going plastic free in any of these things at all, right? It is about the design of the product and how reusable it is that also matters. It's about how it is used that also matters. Plastic straw over here, it's an obvious problem because, again, it's something you use only once and you throw it away. And if we had something reusable, even if the reusable straw was made out of steel or plastic or glass, the fact that it is reusable is what makes it sustainable. Obviously, if you have something metal, it will be easier to recycle at the end of life. So that would be preferred. Balloons is not something we often think about, but balloons are single-use product, which are used once and then thrown away. Instead of that, we could look for decor items, which are either reusable, you know, cloth buntings or things like that, or maybe if you can use things that are made from, you know, the confetti plastic that is thrown away. A lot of people have started trying to use dried leaves or, you know, small paper bits to use as a replacement for that. So at least it can be composted and swept up with the dust at the end of the party. Balloons last forever. And a lot of times we even release balloons in the atmosphere, but we don't think about where is it going. It usually ends up going and falling into some water body and gets eaten up by animals or falls into a, you know, plain land or something like that. It is ultimately, we are releasing trash very poetically into the atmosphere. That is what we are essentially doing. So think about what can be done. You know, it's not a solution that we can maybe implement, but if we can start thinking of these solutions and we can start preferring them when we see the option available for it, we are essentially giving more value to the circular ideas and solutions that people are going to come up with. So say we have a lot of beverages, cold drinks, and things being sold, which create a lot of these bottle plastic waste everywhere. What could be a circular solution for this? Can anyone tell me?
We should use glass bottle, like glasses made of glass, as it used to be previously happen. And the restaurants, they can keep warm water to clean them fast. You know, it's not very lengthy process.
Mhm.
And this is how we used to do, and the kitli wala used to do it just abhi tak bhi wo log yahi karte the. They used to follow this. And yeah, even paper glasses are not good because we have to cut a lot of trees to make those paper glasses. So glass is the safest and easy to clean. You put
Yeah.
them in warm water with some detergent or some liquid cleaner. 2-3 washes will clean it immediately.
Mhm. Definitely, that is what we were doing so far.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any other solution? There's one more solution that can be.
Yeah, I have a solution. I'm really sorry about the background noise. It's raining here. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. So basically, what I thought was, if these are the beverages that are available probably in malls or somewhere, maybe near schools or colleges, we had these things like where there was a line of sodas, and we could just take a glass and fill it in. Instead of buying separate bottles, if we could have that sort of thing where you can put in a coin and get a
Yes.
glass of whatever beverage you want.
Yes.
So if these beverages if they're sold near schools or colleges or any place where people just want something refreshing to drink, not because they want to take it home, but they just want it for that time, then I think this could be a good solution.
Yes. So imagine we lived in an idealistic world where all of us carried our own bottles or our own glasses. If we had a vending machine where you could just put a coin and you could refill it with whatever container that you have, then amazing, right? You wouldn't have need to even call someone to wash the glass bottles at later, because that is definitely an inconvenience that companies are still trying to avoid. They don't want to go back to the old way, but they still want circular solutions that can cut waste at source. So investing into vending machines and investing into installing these vending machines, getting them refilled, making sure that is the company's responsibility that they refill their machines so that consumers can come, put in their coins or their pay their money via UPI maybe in vending machines and get their refills. Because most of the times when we are buying these drinks, we are buying it for that momentary pleasure over there. We don't think about what we'll do with the bottle later on. So if we can just satisfy those cravings in that way, that would reduce the waste at a really large level. Okay. Yeah. So similarly, chocolates being sold in plastic. We have had old school bakeries and these bakery shops all the time now. What if chocolate could be sold open by these people? What if we could package them in our own boxes? What if we could find packaging for these kind of materials which can be recycled easily by us and composted easily by us? So there are chocolate brands that are coming up who are trying to make sure that the packaging is more conscious. Obviously in the beginning such alternative products will be a bit expensive, but as more and more people take it up and the demand increases, the cost will also reduce as well. Gift wrapping done in plastic, the most needless thing ever, right? And we mostly do it for things because we find it aesthetic, because we want it to look shiny, and we have an obsession with that. It can easily be packaged with maybe newspaper and old paper, or we could just go without packaging itself. Maybe we could give it in like bags. So these are these little things in our culture which have become very strong part of our. We feel like it's traditional, we feel like it's expected from others when we are choosing these things, but they are waste in the end and they can be very easily avoided, and in the long run nobody really remembers or cares about it as much. And these are things we can change about our traditions. So while we have been thinking about how on an individual level all these things can be done, what is the most idealistic version of circular economy you can see in businesses? So here are some real world examples. Sorry. So Chindi was a brand. Unfortunately, they're not here around anymore, but Chindi was a brand which was started on a really interesting concept, which they used yarns made from recycled textile waste. So there's a lot of textile waste, which is, waste clothes that come in India. There's a unit in Haryana, which basically recycles them into mulch, and that fibered mulch is then created into a yarn, and that yarn is used to make products. So Chindi started crocheting their bags with this recycled yarn. Now, why is crochet an important part of them being circular? Now, if you think about any bag which is made, it has to be cut, the pattern has to be cut on a flat surface of fabric, and then the extra fabric is still wasted, right? But when you're crocheting something or knitting something, you're making it from scratch, from the, the product starting till the end, without creating any waste. And that is like a circular idea by design. So you're not creating any waste in the production, and you're making it using waste materials in the first place. So this was the most perfect example of the best thing you can do out of waste materials. You have bulk stores now all over the world who are attempting to sell home essentials and home needs in a refillable system. So the idea you gave about beverages, imagine that idea could be applied to any product, right? Shampoo, bathroom products, toilet cleaners, floor cleaners, detergents, anything could be sold in refillable systems. You would have to switch on the tap, just refill in the bottle that you got from your home and take it home. Grains, rices, dals, everything is sold in bulk around us in India. From old kirana stores that have already existed in India, we can very easily take our own cloth bags, request the shopkeeper to put it in our cloth bags, and we can come home zero waste. But we still see them packaging in plastic packets because none of us have the tendency to develop this habit, to be mindful enough to carry our own bags. So whenever you see items being sold in bulk, it is a very good reason to be excited, because it means that is one more item in your house that you can bring without creating any waste. The only thing we have to do is remember to carry our own containers. Loop Store is a business that has been operating in London, Paris, New York. They started in a few major cities in Europe and US. And what they're doing is they're collaborating with major companies, Häagen-Dazs, and companies like all kinds of very, very huge corporations, Dove, and they're creating reusable packaging for their products. So if you can see over here, this ice cream packaging is not the usual packaging that company sells it in, but Loop offers it on their platform. So if people shop from Loop, they will find all these products in reusable packaging, and Loop will deliver it to your doorstep. And when your products are empty, you can book a pickup and they will pick it up from your doorstep again. And they make sure they do this in a way, they use electric vehicles, they make sure that they do a pickup in one single round. So, many customers pickups are done to make sure that, it's energy efficient as well. So they're creating a circular system with the products that already exist. Clothes, thrift stores, vintage stores, they make sure that used items get another home, which means used items are not thrown away. So if instead of shopping a brand new item again and again, if we could check around with our relatives, we could check around with our friends, we could get something secondhand, borrow, thrift. These things go a long way in making sure that the materials that were mined from the earth stay in use for as long as possible. We don't need to create demand for something brand new when we get the impulse to get something, right? As soon as you get the impulse, maybe stop, maybe reevaluate, look for something secondhand, look for something used. And more often than not, a lot of people give up on the items that they have, not because they're good anymore, but because sometimes they're bored of it. And one example we can see of that is there's this app called This for That Closet, where there's a huge community of women who are exchanging things that they have, perfectly usable things, not something that is raggedy and, worn off or torn, but they're exchanging the things that they have to keep things in loop. And this has helped all the women in that community to shop less brand new things. And basically they are enjoying their, shopaholic tendencies by making sure that they get something that is already used. Toys is something that creates a lot of waste when we keep buying new and new, because your kids are going to grow out of it. They're not going to use it anymore. And usually in India, it gets passed down to other kids. But we have this tendency that, if we come from a good family, our kids should have the best and the brand new toys. And, if we are passing it down, we'll probably pass it down to our maids or something like that. But we don't need to have that kind of a mindset. We could ourselves be the family that gets secondhand toys. We could ourselves try as much as possible to look for toys that already exist from, other families before us. And Furlenco is another example where furnitures are rented. So instead of having to buy brand new furniture every time you move somewhere, you can just rent the furniture, and the company themselves are making money. They're profiting from the same piece of furniture by just shifting it from one house to another house to another house. So a lot of people have this complaint that in a circular economy, we're always talking about using less resources, reusing. How can we profit from that? Well, we profit from things like this, from renting them repeatedly, from having repair services. And these things will be profitable if we as consumers recognize the value in them and start paying money for it. So Furlenco is a great example of a circular economy based system. Even Airbnb, if you think about it, having to build a hotel from scratch, constructing a building from scratch. Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to cut trees to make resorts? We can use the existing houses, the existing buildings. We can rent out the existing space and create an amazing, hotel service. And today, Airbnb is one of the most successful corporations there is, because the circularity has saved them the money. It actually makes the business more efficient. Our Better Planet is also an example. The marketplace encourages the sale of recycled, upcycled materials. They sell products that are made from natural materials. So you can see the examples of a lot of circular solutions being sold on this marketplace. And this helps to increase the lifetime of the materials, which is otherwise would be considered waste. So if more and more of us businesses encourage the use of materials made from waste, made from upcycled materials, that would be great in encouraging the demand for them as well. And the jobs that are created from them will be sustainable as well. All right. So we never have to create waste by choice. If we could design something that could be used again and again, why would we ever end up creating waste to begin with? So while we're shifting from linear to circular economy, obviously it's going to take some time. And while we do that, to bridge the gap, recycling becomes a very important part of our lives. We have to learn how we can now, obviously the products we have created now are not perfect, but what can we do instead of throwing them away? Recycling becomes a huge part of that. So now, instead of throwing things away, we try and look for as many technologies, we try and innovate as many technologies as possible to recycle these materials. So how can you play a role? We will need resources to go zero waste at source in our consumer choices. Think about everything that you're using in your house that will end up as waste someday, and start with the things that are thrown away more frequently. Don't worry about the things like your appliances and your... Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mridula, for a
Yes.
moment we kind of lost you, but now you're back.
Okay. So don't worry about objects which will probably be thrown away after years and years of use. Of course, we would wish for a place where, perfect solutions are there for them. But think about the items like, your toothbrush, your, tissue paper, your everyday things and packages that you're bringing in your home regularly. How can you bring better zero waste alternatives for that? And how can we manage the plastic waste that we are helpless about? There will obviously be many things like medical packets, medicines and things like that, which you will not find an alternative for. And ideally, we shouldn't be that extreme with ourselves that we give up on everything just in order to go zero waste. So how can we compost the wet waste that we're creating in our kitchen? That is something that we throw away on a daily basis, right? So that can be cut down at source as well. How can we better understand segregation and recycling? So this is how I basically make sure, the materials and ingredients in my house are bought zero waste. I look for bulk kirana stores like this. I carry my own cloth bag and I try and shop from there with my own cloth bag. Now I have also got my mom excited about this process. So now every time she's looking for a store and she finds something in a package free option, she is, quite excited about it. And she's also enthusiastic about shopping this way now. But it will take time to get your friends and your family to, warm up to the idea. So I would definitely say, if you want to bring this change in your house, be more proactive and, offer to help, offer to step up and, help if you want to bring these changes, especially because it tends to happen that there's one or two people in our home who are taking responsibility for the kitchen, and food is the largest source of waste in our home. So if you want to bring any changes, definitely, offer help over there. Look for reusable packaging when you're at a supermarket. Look for products which are in reusable packaging rather than packaging that has to be thrown away after you remove those packets. So if you go in, even in the coffee section, coffees are sold in packets. They're also sold in boxes with a lid and a screw. You could probably opt for the thing that has a box and a lid. So you can reuse that packaging easily. Maybe you can buy it in a larger quantity. So you can use it for a longer time and you don't have to buy small boxes again and again. You could look for oil mills. Oil mills are something that are a bit rare now. They were a bit more common before. Flour mills, oil mills. These were places people used to take their grains, get their flour made. And oil mills used to offer oil in your packaging. If you bring your own container, they would just transfer the oil and you pay per liter of the oil. This is something we have been fortunate enough to find near our house. So now we try and opt for that option whenever we can. And we have actually realized that the oil from these oil mills are more pure and more thicker than the diluted kind of adulterated oil that is sold at the supermarket. We'll find a lot of zero waste stores who are selling zero waste products that can help your home go plastic free, that are offering solutions that can help you make zero waste choices. So this laundry detergent is a very nice from a brand called Coco Custo. They sell their first package in a tin, and then they send their refills again and again in a paper packaging. So if they know you're a repeat customer, they'll send it in paper packaging. So that one tin gets used forever in your house. You don't have to bring multiple packets. So there are straws and collapsible cups which you can take with you outside. You're enjoying your coconut vendors and things like that. Even cleaning products at home, bristles and brushes, all of that can be replaced with coir bristles and wooden handles. So again, if you see the nature over here, they are reusable, refillable, and compostable in nature. So that is circular. Now, this is something that I had started in the beginning of my journey. How do I manage the waste that I am creating? So I realized that I could recycle my waste if I knew where that waste is going to. Now, I was not simply separating the waste in my house into wet waste and dry waste, because I realized when I was living in Mumbai alone that whenever I separated my wet waste and dry waste, the person who's collecting would take both the boxes and throw it into the same dumpster. So they wanted us to practice how to separate it, but the authorities were not really doing anything about it.
Absolutely.
So what I then started realizing, and that was the starting point for my zero waste journey as well, because I thought I want more agency over knowing where my waste is going. So I did start composting at home, but I also started segregating my dry waste by looking for recycling services who would accept this, and I would know what is being made out of it. So mixed paper, I realized, was a category. I went to a local kabadi wala. If you go to any local kabadi wala or bhangar wala shops, they will tell you what kind of materials can be recycled in your house. And you will not even realize that you had been throwing away those things for the longest time. So if you just check with them and ask them what are the materials they accept, start with segregating that. And how do you segregate that? You have to clean and you have to keep it at home. If you give a kabadi wala, or if you give dry waste with food stains on it, with smell in it, with grease in it, with oil in it, they do not get recycled because they attract pests and rats, and the recyclability value of that reduces. So because of that, it never enters the recycling system. So we are just wish cycling in our head. We are just segregating dry waste, thinking that it will get recycled someday. But if it has food particles and all that dirt, it will never be accepted by any recycling center. So I started cleaning all my dry waste. I started cleaning my mixed paper waste, boxes, paper boxes that I would find. I started keeping that separately. I started keeping my tetra packs. I would clean it inside, rinse it properly, cut it open if I had to make sure it's clean. I started cleaning metal and foil, the food containers that come in metal and foil. You can open that, you can just scrub it a little bit lightly before you start storing that as a metal and a foil waste. Compostable paper, I would, if there's any paper that has food stains and I cannot give it for recycling, I would shred it and put it in my compost. Hard plastic, PET bottles, these are things that are taken for recycling by kabadi wala. Soft plastics is another thing that I found a solution for. There was this unit which does polyfuel, which is they accept soft plastics and they convert it into fuel. So I knew there was a specific unit that took these kind of waste for donations. So I started collecting them for over a period of years so that I can send it to them once I have enough of that waste, if I end up creating it. Now, again, all of this is only if I'm unable to cut it at source, or if I'm handling waste that I end up creating when I'm hanging out with other people. A lot of times I'm not perfect as well. So that is the only reason we have this. In an ideal world, I wouldn't need to recycle as well. So this is what I end up doing whenever I get dry waste in my hands. I separate the materials, I see what they're made of, and I put it in the segregation bin where they belong. So if you see over here, this is a food container that a lot of us receive and we throw it away. But if you're actually careful enough to clean it and keep it, you will realize this is metal that can go into metal segregation. This is paper. You can remove that layer of plastic. The plastic will be the only waste that is created, and the paper can go into your compost as well. So you're cutting down on so much waste by realizing the value of these materials. And for a lot of things that I couldn't find solution to, I started creating an eco-brick. Now, eco-brick is not a waste management solution. I would not say do this and it will reduce your waste, but I did it for things that I didn't have a solution for at that time. And I would start collecting it in this bottle so that I could keep track of how much waste I was creating. I may have created maybe 4 or 5 bottles in 1 year. And that is the most of the landfill waste that I may have created. In very rare situations, maybe if I'm shifting houses and there is waste that is so huge that I couldn't do anything about it, maybe then some of it would end up in landfills. But if I started noticing my lifestyle after I started being conscious about waste, I was able to cut down on 90% of the waste that I was generating on a daily basis. So my house, we stopped using the dustbin altogether. Even if our dustbin got full, it would be collected by the kabadiwala, maybe not the kabadiwala, the trash picker, once in 4 months or once in 5 months instead of every week or every 3 days. So you could see the difference that when you start making an effort in your house, your waste footprint reduces by that much. So if you want any resources for to send these recycling, where are these private recycling centers where you can send your waste to, or you can get in touch with, or you can book a pickup for, maybe if you're living in a city, check out my website, ulesu.com, and scroll down. There is a section called waste management, which you can click on, and you will find links to all the resources that I have discovered, which will help you reduce your waste. And what do you do about the wet waste? So I'll take a small break and I'll just see if you guys have dropped any questions. Unilever has a huge recycling option in Bangkok, but it's still a headache for people to segregate and take it there and put it accordingly, but it is a great start. Yeah, it is a great start. At least there's an option for people to choose, right? I mean, it's one thing to be like, hey, it's pointless because no one's going to do it. But what if someone wants to do it? Does that person at least have an option to, go drop their waste somewhere or do something? The more we make it convenient for the consumers as a business, the more successful we'll be in making zero waste movement successful for more and more people. E-waste is a big problem. We don't find agencies to pick them. Yes, Chrome used to have an initiative where they would have drop-offs for e-waste, but someone told me that they have recently stopped. But e-waste is still picked up by some agencies. There's Enside, there's Trash and Recycling in Bangalore who collects all kinds of dry waste, and then they redirect it to companies who will recycle it.
Mridula, there is a suggestion around thrifting. I think Aparna responded to that. I would really want you to take it up because thrifting is a little bigger concept, right? And I think a lot of people have a lot of apprehensions around that. So
Yeah.
what I would like to throw light on is that thrifting is a differently sustainable activity. I mean, it's not about, the kind of clothes that you're going to use secondhand. They have to be a part of sustainable fashion. That's my take on it. It's more about reusing those garments, which might have polyester in it. That's true. But then if it's not being reused, then that's a bigger worry, right? So
Yeah.
Aparna, I'm sure you want to add something to that. Please go ahead if you can hear me. But yeah, Mridula, your point of view would be nice because we can't hear you. You're on mute.
Hold
on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So recently I was talking with someone in Bangalore, and then she's like, I really want to try and stop fast fashion, and I've tried to shop from eco-friendly brands, and I paid a particular price, but the buttons came off. And I spoke to some eco-friendly brands about this. I think I mentioned it to you too, Pallavi, and then she spoke about thrifting, and she said, I couldn't get the right size, I couldn't send it back. Okay, it was personal issues with her, and I was just trying to have a conversation. But she also mentioned that there are a lot of places in India now just jumping on this sustainability thing and selling things as thrifted, but they actually new polyester, which is quite surprising for me, but not really, because people do all kind of crazy things. So once again, I think with thrifting, it's very important to understand the place where you're getting it. Like in Bangkok, I support a thrift store, which is 100% they support a charity, And for them, even the concept of thrifting, they didn't get it. In fact, I keep telling them to get their prices higher because they are just democratizing it even for the sweeper on the road. And I understand that's why they keep their prices very low. They just save a lot of the surplus, and sometimes it's new H&M. Well, there's so much overproduction, which is a sad part. So they bring it in and also secondhand and sell it for a very, very minimum price. So I'm completely okay to support them because I know the owner, I know that they're genuinely saving it and keeping it circular, right? So my thing is two things. So one is, okay, it's a great option for people who want to shop eco-friendly and who can't afford eco-friendly. But once again, with the washing machine and all the microplastics, I understand these have to stay circular.
It's yeah, pick your battles, because if your focus is to not have polyester in your wardrobe, then you're basically thinking about replacing it with all natural. And what are you going to do with the polyester you already have? Someone else is going to have it. If you don't have the responsibility of the fact that your consumption has created microplastic, it means you're just passing it on to some other consumer, or you are willing to burn the clothes, or you're willing to throw it away. So in my opinion, that is more wasteful right now. And that
I want to drive home that we should not really try to achieve that 100%, that idea of, either I do it totally right or I don't do it. That's the problem, I think.
That's definitely a problem.
Yeah.
And if you see the photography and the aesthetic of sustainable brands also, they try to do everything in an all natural manner in a way that creates anxiety in us if we have anything plastic at home, right?
Yeah.
So that shouldn't be the objective of a circular economy. The objective should be that we use what we have properly until it is unusable anymore, and then we move on to better options. Because if we live in a world where we are like, we want everything natural and we don't care where our unnatural thing goes, that is a form of elitism in your consumerism as well, right? You want things to be perfect in your wardrobe, but it doesn't matter where someone else might be taking responsibility for that waste.
And that's a total waste also, right? I mean, the ideal way is to use it fully, whatever it is. I mean, in a certain end of its life, and then probably move to something else. So you decide today that, I want to ride this sustainability bandwagon today. And then you just decide, okay, let me just throw all the plastic in my house and go and shop for, that's not mindful consumerism at all. That is something which is like you're unknowingly doing it because, there's a...
We are still catching up with the times.
There's kind of a pressure that's telling you to, you have to make that change. But when you understand it, that, using this is also very important because it has to fulfill its life, then you probably take that first step towards sustainability is what I was going to mention. Yeah, go ahead.
There are ways to control the microplastic drainage also from your things. If you feel like that is a huge concern for you, what I would say is that is a concern that is so huge that probably it's not in our consumer control to reduce it as much as possible. But there are some things that can be done for that as well. If you have polyester clothes, maybe don't wash them as often. Maybe try and do hand washing so that there's not a lot of friction. So the microplastics shed when there's a lot of friction and a lot of wear on the surface of the polyester clothes. And if you have polyester clothes that have like a fur, like how you see towels and fur, which have the threads that are coming out as a design feature, those have more tendencies to fall apart. So that becomes more of a microplastic issue. When you have surfaces which don't have that kind of shedding, you don't have a lot of microplastic pollution. You can use cold water to wash. You can use much more gentle detergents to wash. You can wash it less often. You can maybe sun dry it on days where it's not that dirty. Sun drying is sterilizing on a very great level. So you can do those things to sort of minimize how much you end up washing your polyester. Maybe I wash my natural clothes with much more ease than I wash my polyester clothes. And of course, if you ever buy something new, make sure that it's natural. If that is a goal that you are aiming for. If that is something you have made your peace with, that no, that is not my goal, and I want to keep secondhand items in loop as much as possible, then yes, that is a compromise you make, that I have admitted that polyester will be in my wardrobe and I'm willing to take responsibility for that.
swapping is become so popular. It's unbelievable. One lady who I know who started is American, and their Fashion Revolution does it. So different business models. And the Indians, expired Indians who go there. And initially she said, you know, that I was telling her in India, it's this whole thing on, even my mother-in-law said, my God, it's just the whole mentality, right?
Same,
Like
same. My granny still scolds me. It's like, why are you wearing people's clothes? Your dad is earning well money. Why are you insulting us like this?
yeah.
I face this all the
Seriously.
time in my house. But the thing is, when you
Even my generation does it, yeah. Like my niece, because of me, she's thrifting. She's in UCLA, and her
Mhm.
mom is like, "Yeah, she acts like there's no money. She goes buy, gets all this nonsense, and comes." I said, "It's good." So I think yes, there needs to be more education, and it's
Culture.
changing, like
Yeah.
culture. But even Thai culture, it wasn't accepted, but now it's got so popular. Somehow the sustainability movement, and I think Pallavi, I was telling you, I met somebody who's been working on it for 20 years. She's been so passionate. But she said what she's seen in the last 1 or 2 years, she's not seen in 18 years. So we've had these refill stations. I cannot tell you 20 plant-based cafes near my house. I really hope they survive the lockdown. It's just, there's also an NGO funded by a Thai billionaire, I think. So that's really helped because they've made the huge festivals, zero waste, education, awareness, composting. There's so many people doing it, and spreading awareness. So same way the swapping has caught on with the Thai culture too. Of course, it's a long way.
It's about what stories we are okay with as a group of people, right? If there's one person who is thinking this way and 9 people disagree with it, they will pressure that one person to also comply. But if there are 4 or 5 people who start thinking this way, then we will leave each other to live our life, and we will start creating a community where all of us agree with each other. In fact, if someone tries to be an over-consumerist in a society of people who's trying to reduce consumerism, they will then start getting shamed. So it's about how we
yes.
stories and
how we But how to do it? Like I told somebody, like you go even to Zara and H&M, and 20,000 people have tried that same outfit you're trying on, right? I mean, this one day I told somebody, and it worked for one person. I said, it's the same thing. You're anyway go there and you're wearing clothes somebody else has worn, right? So this also, you can wash it with Dettol. You wash it with Dettol. I mean, but I have a lot of young people here. Yeah, the younger generation, Thai Indians, come up and say, wow, you see you thrifting, swapping, and just love that. But my mom will never love it. And I think that is a huge something I need to think about a lot more. I want to go into schools and talk about this. But yes, there is this huge cultural thing. People are okay sending it to landfills because the space on Earth is free for the whole world.
But they're not aware. They're not aware it's going to landfills. A lot of times, I'll tell you what happens in India. We consider Indian culture very sustainable because we think we donate it to our, workers and laborers, and we see we're donating it to less privileged people. We are sustainable already. But how many donations are those less privileged people getting from you? Are they even willing to wear the clothes that you've given them? They will be happy with 5 or 10 sets of clothes in their home, and they are not going to wear these fancy dresses you're giving and all these modern Western clothes. So where is that going to go? And they also have an underground black market where they throw away the clothes, and chindi wala, someone scraps it or create something out of it. There within themselves they try to have a circular economy because they don't have money. That is like by default circular. So we are under the impression that we are donating and making something good for someone, but you have no idea if they are throwing it away to the landfill, right? So the more we take responsibility for the resources in front of our eyes, the better it is for us. Now, someone has said that, composting is also a bit tricky, and it's, conditions need to be better to be successful. It's a myth in the current society, and it's better done in a apartment level. I agree with that. But if you're not able to convince your apartment to have an apartment composting system, do you give up? That is also something that you need to ask yourself. For all those 20 families in the apartment to open up to the idea of composting, even if 1 or 2 families in that building start composting and show those results, we will be able to convince more people to convert. The goal is that it should change at a systemic level, but the system is not going to change until the individuals show the willingness to change, and we are not able to bring that willingness. So if you have the power, if you are the decision maker in your family, if you're living alone, these are some things you can try and start. Parul wants to ask a question.
Yeah, actually here, I'm sorry for the background noise. So I'm Parul Sharma. I'm on behalf of earther.org. We have a platform, earther.org. As you said, it's not possible to do everything on a large scale. Right, as you mentioned that it's not possible to do everything on a large scale. So platforms like us, we are there where we actually invite such sustainable solutions to the problems, and someone or the other will take that idea to a bigger level. We expect that. So like there's a plastic bank, right? There's a startup known as Plastic Bank, where they just send people who are willing to get just give back their plastic bottles or plastic material, and from there they take it ahead in recycling. So we actually this is my one idea which I want to share on this platform, that yes, we can go and reach out to such platforms and reach out to people who are ready to take these initiatives at a entrepreneur level, which can help the society, and we can also connect with them, we can join them, which can like take these sustainable solutions not to our home only. Like I can do for my society, let's make a dump and put all the organic compost over there and make something and use it in our parks and our gardens and our terrace gardens and everywhere. So this is something which I can do from my home, from my society. Why not someone takes that level to my entire city or something like that? So this is one thing that I want to add.
Thank you for sharing that, Parul. And I want to mention that, I'm myself been trying to live zero waste since 3 years now. Sometimes I don't have the guts to make that leadership choice of, rallying the community around me. So someone like me, I sometimes make personal changes, and, I try to spread it in a very small way, in whichever way possible that is possible for me. Maybe I start a conversation when my friends notice me living like this. Maybe I speak to my relatives about it, and, this sparks a conversation. But when the right kind of people are inspired, they're able to make bigger changes. So it's also about your level of power. Okay, I know that the building secretary in my building makes much bigger changes in this society. So if I'm able to influence him, I'll be able to influence the whole society. So it's also about catching the right people to influence them and feed these ideas so they are able to make the changes.
Exactly. Someone somewhere is ready to take up your idea and take it to a next level in order to bring sustainability in the entire society.
Yes, and we all have our own set of skill sets that we can implement to make it happen. So I'll just go back to my presentation again. Someone was saying that collecting wet waste in a biodegradable bag and giving it to the authorities is a good way to manage it at a systemic level. I will point out a few issues with that. So yeah, plastic bags to biodegradable bags, in theory, a great idea, right? But what is the main problem with disposing things in a bag that is airtight and air sealed, which is wet waste with wet waste inside? It creates methane gas, and methane gas is 20 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So when you have these giant landfills where your bags of wet waste are lying around, stuck between plastic, stuck between places where air is trapped, your wet waste starts producing gases, which is again the greenhouse gas emission, bad for climate change. So even if you shift to a biodegradable bag, that is still airtight, that is still not allowing air to circulate in your wet waste. It is a temporary solution that we are just offering because we want to eliminate the plastic. But on a larger scale, the problems that a wet waste produces in a landfill, that will not fix itself. We need to have industrial composters, which is basically huge units and boxes, which creates a situation, creates a simulation of humidity and heat that degrades your biodegradable plastic, because your biodegradable plastic doesn't actually biodegrade in the natural environment. It biodegrades in industrial environments. And a lot of companies are mixing plastic in this and selling it under false claims as well. So no biodegradable plastic you see, please don't trust it unless you test it. Okay. So that is why I still promote composting on an individual level, even if it's difficult, even if it's hard time to convince your parents, even if it takes time. It is a more long-term solution, which is best for everyone. If you can do it on an apartment level, or wait till the government does it, or you have the impatience to do it yourself at home, that is up to you. But let us not be under the false assumption that switching from plastic to biodegradable plastic for wet waste will solve the issue unless the system is in place. Now, industrial composters are not common in India yet. They are not built everywhere. There are 1 or 2 units here and there in Surat or in Nagpur, but industrial composters are not common in India. So all the wet waste being collected from your house are not going to an industrial composter. They're still going to a landfill between a lot of other plastics and still part of the waste problem. So I'll just show how I compost at home. Sorry about the background of my composter because I keep my composter in balcony outside my house. And I don't want, that to be inside and my family gets annoyed with that. So, we have to get a place in our house where, nobody needs to deal with. And basically what I do is in this tier composter, the top layer is covered with newspaper at the bottom and you put brown waste. Compost is basically your wet waste and your dry organic matter, which like, leaves or shredded paper, paper or coir pith, which absorbs the moisture from your wet waste. And in the presence of oxygen and air, it degrades naturally the way organic waste would degrade in a forest floor. So it doesn't create smell because smell is created in the absence of oxygen, absence of air when your wet waste is trapped. That is why your wet waste bin stinks because methane is over there in the absence of air. In a compost, air is circulating through the holes on the wall. So they have the aeration happening. They have brown waste, which is, this dry leaves, which is carbon, which balances the nitrogen in your wet waste. This combines together. It is not a very smelly process at all. If it is smelly, it means you're composting it wrong. It is a sign you need to improve the balance of the dry waste and the wet waste. And that is how that is how all of my wet waste is managed. And when we harvest it, it is this amazing, this bucket of black soil that you can see. It is basically all the food we ate in the last 3 months that turned into this organic rich matter. You can use it in your gardens. You can go out and spread it in community gardens, or you can give it to someone who is interested in gardening if you don't want to start yourself. So you have several options over there. Yeah. So, okay. You were saying something, Aparna?
Yeah, same thing. When I started composting, I was just learning. So once it was smelly and there's too much citrus, but you just have to keep, I think it's a learning process. So, and I also keep it in my balcony because then my husband was like, now you're going to get worms inside the house because I already started different things. so, it is difficult when you live with family members who have different things. So, but my personal experience find that even living in an apartment, it's been very easy. And a lot of times I just put it into my garden pots, the onion and the tomato and the garlic leaves. It's just as they are, sometimes I just put it and they biodegrade anyway. So it's just trying different things.
Yeah, I would also like to point out, like Aparna said, people are scared of the worms and the insects that come with the compost, which is fair enough because you have to think about the idea of hygiene that has been sold to us in the last 70 to 50 years. Any company that wants to make you scared of every insect and everything, like when they show these images of germs, wriggling in the advertisement and this 100%, 99% germs are killed and all the worms are swept aside. It is creating a conscious conditioning in our brain where we are scared of insects and worms in general, even if they're helpful to the nature, and that has led to a place where we are even scared of things like composting, which should ideally be helping us, right? A lot of insects inside your compost stay inside your compost because they are helping degrading the food over there. If there is any pests, excessive pests that are coming out, that usually happens because your compost is very wet and it needs to be balanced. So that is also a bad sign. You can use a lot of things. Daily Dump is a company that sells composting accessories. So they have neem oil, they have spray, they have fly protector, they have a lot of things. They predict these issues and they sell you accessories to help you compost better at home without these organisms entering your home if you're uncomfortable with it. But I want to be clear that the organisms are helping you stay clean and helping you keep the environment clean as well. So over time, we should try as much as possible to get over our fear of them as well, if they're actually helpful. Of course, cockroach, I'm still scared of them. I don't know how they help us, but what I'm saying is the little maggots and things that we see in our compost that is helping it degrade, that is something that we can grow out of it, and it happens slowly. I understand the first time I also started composting, I was quite scared of the things I was seeing because it's not something I'm used to. I'm used to an idea of a lifestyle which is insect free, right? And that came at the cost of pesticides in my house. So to imagine that, hey, pesticides is actually what is killing us and insects are a sign that, things are clean and things are safe in our home. It takes a while for us to shift that mindset as well. And definitely, even if you have shifted that mindset, it takes a much, much longer time to shift the mindset of people around you in your home. So, be patient. It's fine. Expect these resistance, but don't let the resistance stop your efforts.
But I think composting is the next stage, right? There is no, I mean, segregation is what we should first talk about, because I don't see even segregation happening in most places. So, I mean,
And the segregation is not done in a way to tell people that, hey, this is where your waste is going.
yeah,
and people are not cleaning their dry waste also and keeping it.
correct.
Now imagine even if you don't want to segregate. Okay, I admit this seems like a lot of work. You don't want to segregate. We still throw away organic waste every day. So even if you do just composting at home, you're cutting down on 50 to 60% of waste, because now you don't need a bin liner at home. You can directly put your dry waste, and all the dry waste together can go somewhere, even if that is not something you have started taking responsibility for. So composting, yeah, even though it feels like a huge effort, even if that one effort is made, I would say that is a huge impact that will be created in your house. Yeah, so this is just a few slides. We are done with the workshop. If you guys have any other doubts on how to get the habit started, the efforts of trying to make this change, the difficulties in that, if you guys have any questions regarding that also, you can ask me. Yeah, and unless there's self-motivation, only then you can clean your driveways. That is true. And
I think that's true for everything.
Everything. It's true for everything.
School, getting good marks, having a healthy body, going to the gym, things can only happen if you have self-motivation and if you want to make it happen. So
and the problem with sustainability, it's like, I always compare it because I practice yoga. It's easier to tell somebody for selfish reasons, right? When somebody wants to get fit and at least they're driven. I think to encourage somebody to be motivated to be sustainable is also a challenge.
It's like we're doing it as a Samaj Seva, and that is the reason why people don't end up doing it, because you feel like, I do this, it is helping someone else, so why do I care?
Yes.
Right. And I guess and that is why I compare the attempt of going zero waste as a habit change. I do not try to sell it as your means to become the green hero of tomorrow, because if you start looking at it so seriously, you will not even try to change, because you're like, I have to either perfect or there's no point failing also at this. So what I would say is take it up as a personal challenge and experiment these things on a small level. If you don't want to bring like a big compost at home, a small bucket of experiment at home, try refusing the disposables outside once in a while and see what happens. Challenge yourself now and then. And if you're interested in doing this challenge, obviously you're going to start seeing the results in your own life. If you don't want to measure the waste of your entire house, maybe measure the waste of your room, of yourself, the choices you are making. Maybe collect that trash every time you make a mistake, collect that trash and see how you can do better next time. So definitely this is a self-motivated thing only. And I'm assuming if you guys are on this workshop, you are self-motivated to learn more about it. So what happens is, I'll tell you, it's true, you will not find the motivation for a long time, but you are in the process of learning about it, which is part of your journey. Learning about it, watching videos about it, asking questions from people, asking your fears, clarifying your doubts. This is part of the journey. It is not starting the day you actually become zero waste. It starts the day you start exploring about it. So that is why if you want to sustain a habit change, once you have the information, stay exposed to these media. Follow the people who are living zero waste. Follow people who live this way and whose content is teaching you things. And when you start seeing it on a daily basis, you don't need motivation to start suddenly on one day. You will immediately you will have this automatic feeling that, hey, these guys are living, so nicely and they're like having fun and it's looking so great. Even I want to be part of this community. And that motivation starts coming automatically. The problem right now is we are not exposed to these people who are living zero waste. We are not aware that there are people living this way. We are not aware of the communities that are making this happen. So the more you are exposed to this information, the more you will be normalized towards it. That is the basic trick of any kind of marketing any big brand or corporation uses, to brainwash you into buying their products. So why not brainwash yourself into making better choices by following people who are living this way? All right. So exposure to sustainable communities, news and media that discuss innovations, and climate change news. be exposed to these things. It can be a little intimidating, I know, but be exposed on some level so that you are not lost, you're not out of touch with reality. Reach out for more information, make these changes, admit to the changes you need to make, maybe start with a few things that is possible. Maybe even if they're just product changes, shampoo bar, bamboo toothbrush. If you start with small things in your bathroom, you will feel that snowball effect happening into other things in your life. You will feel like making bigger and bigger, challenges when you succeed the smaller ones. Watch your trash reduce when you collect it. It will help you save money. If you're a woman switching to reusable menstrual products, you realize it's saving money over there. You are a lot of items which we were throwing away, a lot of tissue papers we constantly kept buying. If all of these things are cut out at source, you are also saving money in a lot of these places. If you're not shopping brand new things, imagine the amount of shopping you're reducing by, choosing to use what you have or choosing to use something secondhand. So when you start saving money, you start realizing, okay, this is a great way to live. And, I should adhere to more and more such principles. Feeling purposeful, you will start feeling good about your choices because you know that, it's part of a bigger meaning. And when society appreciates you, a lot of time they will make fun of you, sure. But some people who get it will also appreciate you and they will be inspired by you. You will feel really good about that as well. So that is a reward that you're getting for your actions. You see that results in people's eyes and their, compliments. So you will start feeling like you want to do more of it. So look out for these things that will actually help you push you into making these changes. And keep following more experts in the field, dig deeper into the information, invest your time for more information, because a lot of times we are getting greenwashed now. So it becomes very important to be an aware consumer. This workshop is a part of that. A lot of us have been fooled into thinking that plastic free is the only objective to have. But it's not just that, having reusable designs is the objective. Having a way to bring materials back into the system is the objective. So getting your priorities right as you become a conscious consumer is also important. So this is how you create that feedback loop in your own head that will push you and keep you motivated to keep making these changes. All right, so we're done with the workshop. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. Pallavi, over to you.
Mridula, Nitin has a question. He's saying that, they had started segregation and composting since a few years, and it stopped during the pandemic, and now segregations have reduced. So how do we ensure? I think the only way to ensure is by forcing it onto people, because it's not. Otherwise, segregation is not something that most people are very happy about. It's pretty basic. So before we go to the next step of, cleaning your waste and then disposing it, I think that's far away. We need to really look at, and I think they have to be made to understand that what is the kind of effect that it's having, because the effect is really like how you brought it up. It's really, really, what should I say? It's quite extensive. So once they are aware of that, probably, and I don't see it happening in societies because these are huge societies where there are 400, 500 families living together. Apart from really enforcing it and not collecting your waste at the end of the day because you have not properly segregated it, I think that's the only way to go about, really.
Yeah, so Nitin's doubt is honestly about how can we promote this? No matter what efforts you do personally, everyone's first question is, how can we promote this? How can we promote this? Unfortunately, the only way we can do it is by being leaders who are willing to take the hard work to promote the idea, or start an organization that helps other people, or start a business that provides a solution. So if you want mass and large level changes, these are the way that you can put your effort. If you have skills, if you have the ability to, get a job in a company that is doing such a good work, if you have the privilege to do that, definitely go ahead and do that. During pandemic, we had to make a lot of exceptions, myself as well. The lot of bulk shops that you see in our presentation right now, I wasn't able to step out of my house and shop from them during the pandemic. I had to buy my groceries from the shop downstairs to avoid contact as much as possible. So compromises are made. It will not be perfect. The goal is that we try and spread this idea to as many people as possible. So yes, in your society, I would say if you have society composting ready, like in your own apartment system, if everyone's composting, this shouldn't have been an issue. Dry waste segregation, probably the private recycling companies who come to your apartment to pick up the dry waste, maybe they were not operational during pandemic. They will definitely, start getting operational again. So push for that to go back to that as much as possible. If you have any connections with the building secretary or the authorities of that apartment system to speak about this issue again, do bring it up. It is again a part of leadership effort that you'll have to make if you want this to spread to a bigger population. My suggestion would be, if you're someone who is unable to do that, my suggestion would be to please do it on a personal level despite whatever happens in your apartment as well, because even in that way it does spread the idea. And if you're someone who's capable of making large scale changes, please push forward for that, and see where you have the power to be able to do that. Yeah, and help people. Even if you're not able to have the communication skills to speak to someone about the topic and inspire them, and it starts a heated discussion where people dismiss you and things like that. That is one of the reasons where my pages become very helpful, right? My Instagram page is very helpful for people to be just like, hey, just follow this girl. She's talking about something and she'll clarify all your doubts. Yeah, she has a website, she has all these resources, and you can, reach out to her and ask whatever questions. So, introduce people to these ideas through medias and, through pages that they can follow maybe. And then they can make that decision on their own. Because a lot of times when a decision is forced on someone, they will not like accepting it. They will be like, who are you to tell me how I should live my life? These changes are best made when people independently make that resolution. And in the beginning, very few people will be willing to do that. But as more and more people in media start changing their lifestyle, and as more and more people we see in our lives are changing, we start normalizing that idea in our head, and it will become less intimidating for anyone to make these changes. So yes, it starts small, and catch the curious people in your life, the people who are jugadu, who are creative, who love thinking of solutions. Catch these kind of people in your life and spread ideas to them, because they'll be the most eager to try and adapt it. If someone's not eager to try and adapt it, don't worry too much about it. If you're aware of innovation adoption curve, I think I should have added this in this presentation as well. There's always 13% of a population, 13 to 20% of a population who is actually motivated to do self-inspired changes. But the large majority of any population changes when other people change. So when you introduce people to the fact that, hey, there is a community of people already living this way, and what I'm saying is not crazy. When you show them examples, then they start rethinking again. They start rethinking again, and they can see themselves doing it after a few months of following such people. Vani Murthy is a very great example. She has like 80K followers, more than 100K followers now, I think, on Instagram. And she just shows about her composting process every day. So if you're someone who's following Vani Murthy, you're scared of insects at home, you're scared of composting, and her content every day, she shows you small worms, and she'll show you the garden she has created out of her compost. You start seeing the positives of composting, and it slowly conditions your mind to positively think about composting rather than the smelly process it is. You start seeing it through their eyes and through their content, and slowly it conditions you to change your mind. So, a lot of these things go a long way. So, yeah, these are some techniques you can use to influence people as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mridula. I think it was really, really enlightening for all of us, because there's but this is never ending. I mean, we can go on discussing this.
Yeah.
There are just so many things to talk about. I will, since we are anyways running out of time, and I'm just so thankful to everybody who spared their 1.5 hours on a Saturday to join us for a zero waste living workshop. I think you guys are really very motivated. And I think together we can, at least try to bring smaller changes, because these changes have to be community driven. Either it's a community where we live, or a community which we interact with, or a community which we work with. So this has to be something which has to be more like a effort that we put in together. The more we talk about it, the more we really bring these topics to the forefront, the more interest I think it will generate, at least people will be keen to know, what are these people really talking about day in and day out. I mean, the zero waste living, what the hell is it about? And
Exposure
then,
to the information will
yeah,
really.
at least some information, and then if it leads to a change, great. If it doesn't, even then we are at least, they added something to their thought process, right? So that's the intention. I mean, Our Better Planet just aims to really bring out these topics and talk about them in such open forums, so that people who are into it, great, they get more value. People who are not into it, at least they get an introduction and they start thinking on those lines that, maybe that's a possibility. Somebody is doing it. I don't have to tomorrow get up and become the master of it, but I really can probably start looking at it, because it doesn't seem like an impossible task to do. So that's the only motivation. That's our only motivation behind also introducing our vendors to the consumers, because they are also doing amazing work on the lines of sustainability. And Mridula, you have been doing amazing work from quite some time. I mean, I know since I started researching about Our Better Planet, we connected with you, and you have an amazing platform, olisu.com. People, you can definitely look her up. And she has.
What I can do is I can drop my Instagram handle where I talk about my own lifestyle. I talk about, when I'm segregating, the situations I'm in where I create waste. I get quite personal. I share a lot of insightful tips about, the mental effort that goes into going zero waste as well, So if you have any doubts, you want to reach out to me on my DMs and, personally talk about something. If you feel scared of talking about it in public on your Instagram, please reach out to me. I'll always, I'm here to share tips with you, help you out.
Yeah, so I think if nobody has any, if does anybody?
Yeah, I have just one last question.
Please go ahead. Aparna.
Yeah, since you all are both here, so I just, off late, there's something I've been researching to write on. I'm a writer, which Pallavi knows, and I would just like to differentiate sustainability and minimalism. Somewhere when you start your journey towards sustainability, I can speak for myself. I still love buying and shopping a lot of stuff, and I genuinely just don't feel like buying anything, which sometimes goes to an extreme. Like when you're talking with a doctor, I was really sick and went, and those small tablets they had to give in the plastic packet. I said, "Can you avoid this?" I think I just go to one extreme and drive myself nuts also on some days for sure. And then I'm feeling guilty shopping. But I'm also somebody who's always believed in empowering weavers from a young age. And that's how I got into slow fashion, because my love for traveling. I traveled extensively across weaving community in Tamil Nadu, Kutch, Gujarat. So there's always a love for that. So my question is, if you go buy from a sustainable brand, which is, I know a lot of people are claiming to be sustainable, but let's say made from organic rain-fed cotton or hemp, and the whole value chain is sustainable in terms of labor. Okay, let's say if you buy a lot from that, I wouldn't, but somebody wants to buy like 20 outfits from them a year, are they still sustainable?
No, because see, in the end, our consumption patterns are creating demand for more resources to be mined from the earth, right? So it's about brand new versus keeping buying secondhand, keeping things in loop. We definitely need to reduce our consumption. Okay, like if you're buying 20 clothes in like a month, that's no matter what material that clothes are made.
What happens to these weavers? I always worry, because in India there's the population issue, right? And a lot of them really need to be empowered, and they're not.
Trust me, if we shift the fast fashion consumption to the weavers, that is still a shift that needs to happen, which has not happened yet.
Yes, so I'm completely not talking. I'm just talking with somebody who genuinely feels like you go to weaving community and you feel really sad during the
second. Yeah, that is the second part where the price
sustainability, right? It is a problem about social sustainability. I mean,
also about the price.
The price.
So I'm saying 20 genuine, fully sustainable. As I said, rain-fed. Those are
at the end of the day, they have to be sustained also, right? The weavers have to they have to get money for their families. Their families need food, right?
Yeah. So think about the price. Think about the price also over here, guys. Right? We keep complaining sustainability is expensive. It has to be expensive to make you think about your shopping choices, and at the same time sustain the people who are making these products. It has to be expensive. Yes. Because if they are making as much as fast fashion, like they cannot make as many hand looms as a fast fashion, like a power loom, that is machine that is churning out the polyester clothes. Obviously polyester will be cheap. Obviously we can afford to buy 20 clothes in a month because they are costing us 300-500 rupees, right? But if a pant is costing you 2,000 rupees, say, or 4,000 rupees, that makes you think. It can't make you buy as many things. And at the same time, all that money is going to the weavers who are probably making this, right? So the price.
Yeah, so I'm saying I can't buy, let's say I wouldn't, that's not my priority buying so much. But somebody buying 10 of that to empower the weaver, why can't they be called sustainable is my question.
From
Like, I'm just,
I will call them sustainable. I mean, at least they're supporting.
it's a debatable topic because yes, because India, I was talking to Fashion Revolution country head here, and I keep telling her there's a difference between Thailand and India. India has a huge community of weavers who need to be empowered. Every time I travel, I just feel so sad seeing some of those communities. Right? I mean, it's a population issue for sure. So we have to continue empowering handicrafts. So sometimes I feel guilty just buying for the sake of buying. And I'm like, am I sustainable?
In my personal opinion, probably I find it unsustainable because it doesn't seem like something I could afford to do, right? I also probably can't afford to have that level of consumerism in my life for sustainable products. But say there's a rich person willing to shell out that kind of money and create demand for sustainable products. It helps in the long run, yes, because if it increases demand for sustainable products, it will help sustainable products become a little more affordable for more people to accept it.
It can democratize. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. So if this rich person also assuming hates fast fashion, doesn't buy fast fashion at all, and is just buying a lot of sustainable products to empower weavers, it's still okay. Thing to do.
This rich person, instead of buying 20 polyester clothes, if they're buying 20 natural clothes, definitely it's more sustainable than what they were doing before. My only concern would be that in the end, we also need to inculcate the habit of buying less among people during a time, and not buying less because you need to be miserly, but buying quality things when you're buying less, you know, even if
I'm all for buying less, but then the economic problem, I'm always confused, especially with so many people who need jobs. Right? I mean, I know it's a silly question because same thing, people will say, oh, you boycotted fast fashion. What happens to the industry? My answer to that is more and more if we empower slow fashion, it can grow as an industry and they can employ more people. I don't think, but the industry is not doing it, right? They're saying what happens to people working in Zara, H&M. The typical question I get asked, I actually meet people working in, I met a girl working in Mango and she's saying how desperately she wants to quit, but she needs a job, right? So what happens when these companies go bankrupt? Jobs, it's the same with the fossil fuels.
These companies will also have to change.
Disappear
overnight just because we boycott them. They have catered to a need of low-income people, and they will have to change them if they want to be sustainable.
Yes, I'm completely against fast fashion and their model.
I would be more than happy to quit fast fashion, but say there is a person who can only afford fast fashion prices, right? Like that was the only way for them to even shop in a minimal manner. I can't tell this person to quit fast fashion, you know, if
but they can swap and thrift. I mean, today I feel like this, there are options.
Thrift has some downfalls as well, like, you know, if you specific this color, this exact thing, or, you know, something like that, it's hard to find, and maybe some people don't have
basics are difficult to find. True.
So there is a need for brand new sometimes. What I would is the company itself has to become circular. So there what happens is wait, did I stop screen sharing? I'll just show this part of my presentation that I was talking about. You have to come to a place where you create a system where wait, hold on. Okay, so if the materials that you are mining from the earth or anything, or if polyester also is something you're using, you have to create a system where that polyester can go back and create more clothes. You have to invest with that, and you have to figure out a way to make your entire supply chain circular. Design things has to become circular as well. So definitely, I mean, consumption, we say reduce consumption, reduce this, because it's the quickest way to become sustainable. But the long-term way for the masses to go sustainable is for businesses to become circular in general. Now H&M is trying to promote this. They're saying, oh, we are recycling resources and all, but for the amount of clothes, brand new clothes they're generating, the amount of recycling is minuscule. Okay, so absolutely, they're a long way from becoming a completely circular economy, and there are a lot of drawbacks with recycled fabrics as well. When you put different colors and patterns fabric into one machine and mulch it, they will come out in a single color, which is like a or a composite color or something like that, and they have to make clothes from that. Now they say that we have a recycling scheme, So this collection is sustainable. But the collection every time has brand new, nice prints and, fresh.
It's absolute BS what they're saying. Recently, I saw a documentary. So much of what they collect as recycling is still going to landfills in Africa. And Africans are like, please stop sending us like this shit. We already have this. I used to speak to a designer in West Africa. Exactly. The local economy is getting affected. So it's just so.
You're a company who's like, I want to produce at this scale because I want to give jobs to my workers. I have to maintain these jobs. Create jobs, innovate, make circular designs. There are jobs that have been lost because of linear economy, because it is much easier for me to enter a shop and buy new clothes than for me to find a tailor and repair my old clothes. I can't find a cobbler on the street easily these days. I can't find a bag repair shop easily these days. These jobs are losing, right? And these were also the kind of people who would have worked in a factory. Maybe they have shifted to working in a fast fashion factory because nobody is repairing their things anymore, or nobody sees value in those things anymore.
Yes.
If you're a kind of consumer who's willing to pay money and say, no, I am willing to pay money to repair rather than get brand new, then you will create jobs for the repair economy.
Yes.
And
yes, absolutely.
Jobs in the circular economy. So that would be my answer for the.
And that's what strategy Patagonia they're doing. I'm not sure about North Face. So Good On You is an app I keep checking for the value chain of different companies. And there are CEOs coming out and really talking about repair and trying to keep that one product you buy last a lifetime. And look at different business models like, look at different business models.
Wozniak from Apple has supported right to repair, which is like a huge thing because Apple is very knowing.
One of the first, exactly, creating waste.
Yeah. It's a never-ending kind of a
conversation
we're getting ourselves into. So, I think we need to kind of put an end to it also. So, thank you everybody for your time. And Aparna and Mridula, we can definitely connect offline and take this forward. I know we have had conversations. Our first conversations with each other have been really, really long. So I know
the economy is a good question because a lot of people have that, circle as much money and, all of those things. So it's a good question, but it needs to be answered as well that, the jobs being lost were lost in the pre-circular economy as well, which needs to be brought back.
Like this one last thing I want to say, even Biden, I know a lot of people don't support AOC's Green New Deal, but I think she says like it can create more jobs on paper. Right, we have to really wait and see if that's a green, like how this whole industrial revolution happened. If a green revolution you go zero pesticide, everything becomes circular, right? Particularly agriculture, blah, blah, and you can create more jobs. It's the ideal situation what we'll see in the next 10 years.
We make money where we put value. That's the thing.
Absolutely. I know we can keep talking and I'm done.
Sorry. I'll call this workshop over for now.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you everybody. Have a lovely evening. Bye.
Bye everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.